manageable, and we calculated that for a mile length of trail, it should only require 17 truckloads to complete the earthwork.
We select two options as potential trailhead locations. We look in both options to see what's going to be more exposure for downtown area, and they are public lands, and also they have like public utilities, so we don't have like to make another ones. The first option is it's in this square garden. This one was asked by the client, wasn't our first option, but was asked by the client to choose to look for this option. The second option that have a large space, it's in the north of the tennis courts.
Alright, so Fernando said, the Garden Square lot was analyzed. As you can see, the area that was suitable for a trailhead development is on the south end of that Garden Square. The pros for this area is that it's in the center of town and directly near most businesses. It was expressed by you guys, or by the city, and talking with Jeff, that the trailhead location should not only provide a stopping place for riders, but also help those surrounding businesses where these riders could come to the trailhead and maybe stop at a store or stop at a restaurant along their ride. Another bonus for this area is that it will provide restrooms for the Garden Square area. That was another desire expressed after we sent out our original designs, and by doing this, there will be permanent restrooms. The cons of this area is that it is only 10,000 square feet. In comparison to the other lot near the tennis courts, it's only about half the size of that, so it's a lot smaller. Also, this will, once the trail becomes more used and eventually connects into the Des Moines area, we anticipate that there will be many more people come in this area. So street parking will increase and potentially more cars just in the area. So the other option was the tennis court lot. And like I mentioned, it's a lot bigger, almost twice the size. It's approximately 19,800 square feet. Because of its size, parking lot can be developed within the lot, which is a definite bonus. Also, if there was ever to be future expansion to the trailhead or other amenities wanted to be added in this lot, it is possible because it is such a large area. The cons to this area, unlike the Garden Square, is not directly downtown. If riders wanted to stop here and stop into a store or restaurant, they'd have to leave their bikes and go across the street, which would be a longer travel than the Garden Square. Also, riders will be routed farther off the trail to reach this destination. As you can see, the railroad comes along the bottom of the screen, and riders would have to travel up the sidewalk to get there, so they might be less inclined to stop here.
The trailhead designs, I think this is the most expected part of the presentation. We designed two options. The first option was required by the client as a rectangular shape. The second option, it's a hexagonal shape that we developed so you guys could choose between both. Both are roughly the same size and about the same cost. And we developed these two options so we can see which one's gonna fit better in each side location.
So from the two alternatives for the designs and the location, we first selected which location we thought would be most suitable and meet the client's desires. We determined that would be the Garden Square because it was strongly expressed that this trailhead has the potential to bring business to the local stores and restaurants, and we determined putting riders in closest proximity with the surrounding businesses will give that the greatest chance. From there, we selected the design that we thought would fit best within this lot. Also, early on in the design process, it was expressed over our conference call that we take inspiration from the Bondurant trailhead. So we kind of used that design and that geometry, and we came up with this model, which we think fits best within this lot. It's it fits better in the rectangular geometry of the lot, and we think is the most aesthetically pleasing of the two options.
As a request by the client, the trailhead features need to have restrooms, water fountains, picnic tables, bike racks, bike repair station, so if bikers have any problems, they can fix their bikes, storage room, and for the water, the rain, we develop a rain garden. The trailhead size has a concrete slab of 3,625 feet. It's a little bit bigger than the structure. The structure has 1,060 square feet, and we have a covering area of 800 square feet. That it's large enough to fit 6 picnic tables. That was a request of the client that we have this covering area.
So after we decided what trailhead facility we were going to encourage you guys to implement, we went about the structural design to make sure that the structure would remain standing. This is a lot of details, but pretty much used ASE standards, American Society of Civil Engineers, loading cases that were recommended by them, which included snow, wind, and dead load, which is the weight of certain components, so the roof trusses, the roof shingles, whatnot. I plugged it into a structural modeling software, which you can see an example of the output on the left of the screen. It was determined that the worst case loading, or the case that resulted in the largest forces on the structure was dead load plus wind load. So with that, I took those numbers, went to the Wood Council's design manual, and determined that 6x6 southern pine columns would be acceptable, as well as 2x4 southern pine double howe truss. And double howe truss is just a configuration of truss that has several different configurations of wood in the middle. And then you also need a foundation. So going about the footing design, I assumed a worst case bearing capacity of 1,500 pounds per square foot, because we didn't have a lot of data about the soil, so we just assumed worst case, and that way, we have a decent amount of factor of safety to make sure no failure will occur. It was determined that 4-foot 7-inch square footings that are 15-inch thick, made of structural concrete with reinforcing, would be sufficient, which you can kind of see there. You can see on the bottom is the actual footing will have a concrete column going up that'll extend a little past the slab, and that'll support the columns. We also call out for a 16-inch or a 6-inch thick concrete slab under the picnic or the trailhead facility. We believe that will be sufficient. And then below the cinder block wall, which we're going to use to kind of frame out the maintenance in the bathrooms, you need an additional 16-inch wide spread footing to support the wall.
So for the trailhead, we had to do a stormwater analysis, and essentially that means we have to send the water somewhere that hits the concrete pad, whereas before this it would have soaked into the ground. Because there are no stormwater inlets in the street, we had to develop alternative solutions, and we came up with a rain garden. This was designed using the Iowa Rain Garden Manual off their standards. Essentially, they were designed to infiltrate 90% of rainfall of 1.25 inches over a 24-hour period. So if it rains 1.25 inches, these rain gardens should be able to hold all of that water and have no runoff into the street. From this calculation, it was based off the size of the concrete pad that was added and how easily the water flows into the soil in the rain garden. From this, we would need about 365 total square feet of rain garden. And as you can see, the brown part is the rain garden themselves, just to give you a little perspective of what that is in comparison to the concrete slab. It's not a lot of area, but it will be enough to mitigate that water and keep it from running off into the street. The concrete pad, we just plan to have slope so that the maximum amount of water is running away from the street into the larger rain garden, and some of it will be running into the small rain gardens. So the estimated cost of the construction for this project, the majority of this cost comes from the trail itself. Since it's 17 miles long, it is a decently high price. From our estimations, for the 17 miles, the granular limestone surface, the temporary surface that we talked about, would be approximately $810,000. And then that can be reused as a subbase for the hot mix asphalt, which over the 17 miles we predicted to be about $1.85 million. And then street markings through the streets, paintings on the street plus signs, we figured to be around $15,000. For the trailhead facility, we estimate around $200,000. And to give some perspective, the bond rank trailhead itself, the structure was about $200,000, I believe, and then remaining site work around the area was another $100,000. So it was a higher end facility. So these are just kind of ballpark numbers to kind of get an idea of where you would be at for these type of structures. In total, we estimated that the entire project itself would be about $2.9 million. So to kind of recap our whole design, we'll be following the railroad right-of-way from Monroe to Prairie City and then up to Mitchellville. Our plan is to create a temporary granular surface that can be utilized until proper funding comes along, where a more permanent hot mix asphalt surface can be laid. And typically those surfaces have a design life of about 20 years, depending on its usage. And also we developed the trailhead within the garden, south end of the garden square. We picked this location because of its proximity to local businesses, and it will also provide restrooms to that area. And yeah, like I mentioned in the slide before, we estimated that would be about $2.9 million for the total construction of the entire project. Thank you for listening to our presentation, and we'd be happy to answer any questions.
In terms of the existing trail, excuse me, that's been used for railroad operations, in terms of any structures, drainage structures underneath it, or basically anything that would have to be done to make it suitable for the pedestrian and bicycle trail, is there anything significant? You mentioned some earthwork, and I wasn't entirely clear about that. Or is it just a matter of putting a surface down?
Well, essentially because it was a railroad bed, it is a fairly flat surface for the most part that is suitable just to lay this, the granular surface down.